In today's video, I want to talk about another backend as a service provider called Strapi. And in this series, I want to go over web development based applications and tools to help you evaluate whether or not this tool is going to be useful for you and your use case. And today's tool is basically Strapi. Since last time we talked about directors, this is a direct competitor. Basically, I looked at both systems at the same time and additional systems that I will go over in the future as well. Those were the first two I looked at on my journey to decide which backend I want to choose for future projects. Strapi itself is very similar to directors. They're both JavaScript based or more or less TypeScript. TypeScript support for Strapi right now in the conversion. I'm not sure if it's 100% strictly typed. I would have to look that up. They also offer a cloud version similar to all the other providers, which is kind of a steep entry level. I think it's $100 for just the entry level version of the software they provide through cloud. But they also have like the self-hosted open source version of the system that you can freely use however you like, basically. It's been around for quite a few years. I think the first version was in 2016. So they've had a few development steps on their roadmap already. They are privately funded as well. They had like a few backing rounds to fund the project. And the first look was pretty solid. Like from what I've seen, I'm actually using this right now in one of my projects. It does a lot of the things that I was looking for in a headless CMS. It's very straightforward when it comes to setting it up. It does have reasonable amounts of extensibility. I'll go over that later. It does a lot of the things that you need, like structuring your data out of the box very well. And the usability of the backend itself is pretty good. The current way I've hosted this is I've just set it up in a DigitalOcean app container, and it just automatically deploys. So it works pretty good. There was not really any issues. Let's install a version locally real quick, see what the drawbacks are, and take a look at the system itself. So I have the documentation open here. As usual, we have a terminal open. They do advise to install it using basically npx. If you have installed Yarn, you can use Yarn as well. And this is a one-line installation, basically. So we just copy that, paste it in here, rename the project to Strapi. And we're going to use the latest version. The quick start parameter basically skips all the optional aspects of the installation process where you can decide what kind of database, blah, 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 you want to use. With this install, I do believe they use like a file-based MySQL system, so you don't even need an external database server or anything. And you can just run it like this, and it will hopefully install the system locally. This can take a bit because it's obviously based on npm installation, and npm, as we all know, is the slowest package manager in the world right now. There's nothing slower than this. Oh my god, it finished. Took like a solid 5 minutes. So this is automatically launching the development environment as well, so you don't have to do anything. It runs Strapi develop, I guess, which is just an alias for npm run develop. And you see the information here. It's by default running on the lead port, which is always good, you know. It shows some sophistication. We can open it here. We will create like the initial user, which is you know, it doesn't matter what you put in here. I would create a proper password because there's some requirements for the passwords, and you know how it is. But just like that, we have a running version with just everything that you need, basically. So the structure is pretty similar to all the other systems as well. There's some sort of content overview that displays all your content types and all the contents that you have created with these. In Strapi, they call these collections. Collections is basically what defines your data structure. So a collection type could be a user, it could be an article, a page, stuff like that. To create these collection types in Strapi, you use something called a content type builder, which is basically just a UI to create data structure. And from what I've seen and the way I've used it so far, it's pretty solid. So you create article, you can have a text as a title. We can add another field. Let's say, call this description. And let's add a body text. So now we've created our first content type or collection, which is an article. And now we can save everything. This is one thing with the system, because I think it's a file-based like configuration system. It has to restart every time you update the settings, which is very slow right now, and I don't know why. This is usually not as slow as this. I don't know why it's not reloading on its own. Usually what it does, it just reloads the page. Maybe because I'm using Chromium, something is off, but it usually works. So now we have the collection type. We can create a new article. We call it our dummy article. Give it a dummy description and just some body text, like a paragraph. And we can save this. We've created our first content piece, and we'll look at how we will retrieve the data from the system through an API later. We have a media library, which is just a very good asset manager. It does a lot of stuff. You can add new files here per drag and drop and just picking it out itself. They have a plugin system where you can basically extend the entire system. And some of the plugins are kind of mandatory. They have like basic plugins in here that are, I mean, yeah, no reason to not have these, because probably every system that uses some sort of headless content management system would want these things. It is a pretty extensive roles and permission system, which is always good, because if you can use it, it's good, but you don't really have to use it. So if you don't need it, you just leave it out. Marketplace offers third-party plugins, basically. You can't install them through this UI. You have to basically run the command on your system, which is fine. It's no big deal. There's a few ones I thought were kind of mandatory. For instance, there's one that helps you manipulate the API structure, because the default structure, I gotta be honest, is a little rough to read. And there's a lot of nesting going on that creates so much boilerplate. If you want to consume the API, it makes it really cumbersome. So maybe it would be advantageous to use GraphQL with this, so you have a more standardized way of querying your data. But yeah, other than that, using I think this was the one I've used. This is a plugin that helps you transform your API responses. You use some sort of like configuration file that you can put in here, and it's like a transformation function, and it returns the data however you define it, basically. And this is just the basic settings for the backend. You can have your internationalization here, some media library settings. You have your roles, your user management in here as well. And this will have all your custom plugin configurations here at the bottom as well. So first, if you have content that should be consumed by everybody, basically, you would have to go into the roles under users and permission plugin, go to the public role, which is the permissions every user has that is not authenticated. You can also have like a authentication based pipeline where, let's say, you server-side render all your content. You can use like an authenticated user to basically pull the API data as well. That works as well if you don't want public permission, but for the purpose of just showing this right now, we go here and we basically make these two available to the public, so people for an unauthenticated request can query a single content piece or asset, and also query basically a list of all the assets that are available. We save this right here. And now it's time to figure out what the request looks like, because I haven't done this in a bit. So I'll find this out as we speak as well. So this should be this. Oh, since this is still a draft, I think we have to publish this. There we go. And already we've basically, successfully requested the data structure. So as you can see already, we have this kind of unnecessary, we cannot have this unnecessary nesting, which makes it rather hard to read, especially if, let's say, we have, because you have these things called components, which is great in general. It's like ways to have groups of fields inside of your collections that are kind of their own instance of something. So an example of a component would be something, I don't know, where you have like multiple input fields. Let's say you have multiple blocks to design your content, basically. And those would be like block elements or whatever. And you would allow your user to add multiple block elements so they can have a creative way of designing their content. So one block would be something like this. And we would create blocks or content, let's call it content. And then this would have like a text field. And now this would have like a rich text field. Yeah. And I don't know. Then we save this right here. Oh, this one now works, okay. And then we could add another field, which was basically relation or a component. This actually here, yeah. Use an existing component. Then we select a component. And we can do this, and we name it content blocks. And we could add multiple here, I think. Okay. No space allowed. Okay. Fair enough. And now what we could do is, first of all, save everything again, and then we could add, as you can see, multiple blocks of content, and you'd have a way to design these individually when you, let's say, have a front-end system like React or Vue.js. And the issue that I have with this, right now it doesn't show, because I don't remember why, but there's a reason for this and we have to find out. Oh, right. It has to do with the query, basically. So you have to populate the field in your request as well. There might be like a way to populate it globally, but we'll try. We'll try it like this for now. And this doesn't work. Okay, but this does for now. And as you can see, this looks great now, because I think something has changed after last time I've tested. Because it used to be that these attributes were already as well nested inside of an attributes object, which was really annoying. You had to loop over all these attributes, nested arrays and objects. And now it's just an array of objects, which is just perfectly if you want to consume this. Also, what we can do, because obviously we probably want a different syntax than just a capital B here, or like with here as well, we can change the name of the title like this. And then we can configure the view. Oh, let's save this first. And then we can configure the view to show an uppercase label title. So we still have this shown as title, but when we save and confirm, we hopefully now have this title attribute like this. So yeah, this is a very quick tour of the system, like the basic functionality. And I think if you like the look of the backend, it's a really good system, especially if you just hand it over to a user that knows WordPress. I think the developers of Strapi itself also were using WordPress and Drupal before, but didn't like how unflexible the systems are. So it's kind of like, you can see where what it's based on and where they want to go with this, or where going with this. And it's very flexible when it comes to, it's still a backend as a service system. So you don't develop everything from scratch, but you always have to wager speed versus flexibility, right? The faster you want to create something, the less flexible you're going to be. And with this system, I think they found a good way to have reasonable amount of flexibility while still being very, very fast to creating APIs and just content consuming backends. Like, we whipped this together in a few minutes, and to me, it feels like a good system to just use if you want headless front end, just consume an API and don't want to worry about developing backends. So yeah, my biggest gripe with this system was the nested attributes thing here. Like, I would prefer if this entire object was pulled out of this attributes object and just, have the raw object, because when you translate this to TypeScript and you want to strictly type what you receive from the API, it gets very annoying the more nesting you have. But that can be done with the one plugin that I've recommended already, the transformation plugin. And everything else to me looks pretty good so far. So this is definitely a recommendation. I would probably even prefer this over Directus, because it does some things a little better than Directus, and I feel like the UI is a little bit cleaner, but that's basically personal preference. I think both systems offer similar capabilities. With Strapi, you have out of the box like casing. You don't have to worry about some unwanted kebab casing in your API structure, which is like usually I feel like it's a lot cleaner when you already have this structure that you also use in your development process as well. And yeah, everything else is quickly set up. It seems to work properly. And if you don't use it in a production environment where everyone is querying this system, you don't really have to worry too much about performance, because if you have server-side rendering, you will build all the content from this system using your build pipeline, which queries the server once, gets all the data, all the content, and then builds, static HTML or whatever the part of server side you're rendering. And so stability should be fine if you only have the users in the backend working on this. And definitely check it out. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next one.